Chapter 18. The remainder of the memorial service was brief and depressing. A very tall, soap opera handsome man read a poem that I tuned out, and then Cynthia's friend with the guitar sang Sarah McLachlan's Angel. That song would send me into paroxysms of agony on a bright, sunny day, driving an Italian convertible in the countryside with a beautiful girl by my side and a well-stocked picnic basket in the boot. Not that such a thing ever happens. The song had no effect here. To my right, the well-dressed woman sat quietly as the last chords faded and people slowly stood and stretched. I vectored across the room towards Leo, who was angling for the food, his progress impeded by people commenting on his eulogy. A woman who looked to be in her 60s and trying to appear younger was grasping his elbow. "It's true what you were saying about regret," she said, a terrible urgency in her eyes, "and about being known. That's what our struggle is always about, isn't it? The true artists struggle, but how can you do it every day? How can you have the courage to, excuse me, Margaret, I'm sorry, I need to talk to Zach." "Of course," said Margaret, "but I'd love to have the chance." Leo cut ahead of me through the crowd, and the rest of what she said was lost. "Sweet Jesus, keep that woman away from me," he said when we arrived at the far end of the food table. He leaned towards me, speaking quietly as if we were discussing something confidential. "Pain in the ass? You have no idea. A perpetual student, but she refuses to... Oh, crap, don't get me started. She refuses to know and be known?" "Yes, that's it exactly, and screw you if you're being facetious," he said, picking up a piece of corned beef with his fingers. He rolled it up with a piece of Swiss cheese, dipped it in mustard, and popped it into his mouth. "I'm not being facetious," I said. "I thought you were great. Not what one would expect, actually." "You wouldn't expect it to be great?" "No, I would. I just didn't expect something so blunt," I said. "Not at one of these things." Well, screw them if they didn't like it. I didn't want to be the one talking anyway." "You'd never have known to listen to you." "Never have known what?" I heard. I turned to see Cynthia. "Oh, hey," I said. "I was just saying I never would have known that Leo didn't have much experience at these things," Leo said, cutting me off. "You're right," said Cynthia. "It was great. I think Alex would have liked it. He wouldn't have wanted a lot of platitudes." "I'm glad," Leo said. "But should have been you speaking. It's not like I knew him all that well." "Now then we would have been hearing a lot of platitudes," she said. We smiled awkwardly at each other, and she leaned towards me. I thought maybe we were going to have a hello kiss, but she only reached past me to pick up a celery stick and drag it through the blue cheese dip. She turned back to Leo. "I think this is going rather well." "As these things go," said Leo. I looked at the knots of people noshing and holding bottles of beer and plastic cups of cheap red wine. To me, it didn't look like anything more than the gathering you might see after any gallery opening or poetry reading. People dressed mostly in black, brought together by something they didn't really understand, like art, literature, or death, eating, pretending to make sense of it all. Of course, I didn't understand what was going on either, and I was dressed fairly monochromatically myself, so who the hell was I to judge? As I surveyed the room, I noticed the well-dressed woman still sitting in her seat, her handkerchief still clutched in her hand. "Who is that? Do you know?" I asked. "Who?" said Cynthia. "That woman," I said, indicating with my chin. "Sitting alone?" "Yeah." "She's not a student here?" I asked Leo. "No, I've never seen her before," he said. "Have you, Cynthia?" "No. She looks out of place." "Yeah," I said. "I wonder if she's family." "I didn't get the impression any of them would show up." "You told them about this?" I asked. "Yes," said Cynthia. Why, if you were sure they weren't going to come? Asked Leo. Why not? I'll do the right thing even if they won't. They should be given the chance at least. It's not like they were going to show up or participate. I chimed in. Cynthia's right. I've met these people, had a couple of conversations with them. They're pretty weird, pretty disconnected from his death. I picked up 2 glasses of wine. I'm going to go find out who she is. I'll catch you guys in a few minutes. Wait a second, said Leo. Do you guys want to go out for some real food after this? Sure, I said, looking to Cynthia. I don't think I can. I've got to go out with Michael and his sister. Michael? I said. Yes, he read the poem? Oh, I said. Something must have registered in my voice because she got a look on her face. It was original. He wrote it for this. Oh, I said, it was great. I stood there for a moment, the 2 glasses of wine in my hands, waiting for her to say more. She didn't. Okay, well, have a safe trip back tomorrow, and I'll talk to you later. Okay, she said, smiling and looking off towards another woman who was trying to get her attention. I turned to Leo, who shrugged and shook his head. I took my 2 glasses of wine and approached the well-dressed woman who sat stiffly, her gaze resting on the backs of the empty seats in front of her. She looked up as I approached. Excuse me, I said, do you mind if I sit? She continued to look at me, but didn't otherwise respond. Up close, it was impossible to tell her age. She could have been anywhere from a very mature late 20s to a well-preserved early 50s, with flawless skin under very little makeup, the tiniest of lines appearing at the corners of her eyes. Her expression was utterly devoid of affect. Her hands were clasped in her lap. She wore simple gold hoop earrings and a ring with a large jade stone on her left hand. It had some sort of Eastern or Oriental carving on it. I held out one of the glasses to her, and she silently demurred. Probably for the best, I said. It's not very good. I placed the plastic glass on the floor under the seat in front of me so I wouldn't forget it and kick it over. Were you a friend of Alex or just... I let it hang. I couldn't bring myself to ask if she was family. This was too pathetic and makeshift a gathering. A family member would be ashamed. She turned her gaze forward again and then looked down at her hand as she turned the jade ring around her finger a couple of times. At first, I thought she was not going to respond, but then she spoke. I knew him. Yes. From home? You're a friend of the family? She turned to me, concern on her face. Why do you ask? Did he speak of me? Speak of you? I wouldn't know. I don't know who you are. And I wouldn't know anyway. I hardly knew him myself. I only met him twice, very briefly. I don't know that many people here, and it didn't look like you did either. I see, she said. And why are you here if you didn't know him? It seems an odd sort of entertainment. I didn't come here for entertainment, I said. Is that how all of this struck you? Frankly, yes. It looked like frivolous people treating an important passage in a frivolous way so that they wouldn't have to ask themselves any meaningful questions. I see, I said, just to be saying something. Do you? She asked, her gaze direct and unblinking. She really wanted an answer. I think they are all doing the best that they can, I said gently. Yes, perhaps they are, she said, dropping my eyes and looking slowly about the room before coming back to me. So why are you here if it wasn't for entertainment and if you didn't know Alex? The second time I met him was on the night he died, and his roommate is, she's a friend of mine. I came to be supportive. His roommate, the silly little blonde who arranged this affair? I was about to object to her characterization, but I heard a gale of laughter and looked up to see Cynthia and Michael with some others making gay at some story someone was telling. Perhaps it was a remembrance of Alex, but it might not have been. Cynthia had her arm on Michael's arm. The well-dressed woman took all this in as well, and then looked back at me, waiting for my response. "Yes, that's Cynthia," I said. "I was with her the night that Alex died. We were each other's alibi, so to speak." Her eyebrows rose at the word alibi, the first time she showed any expression. "I thought Alex committed suicide. Why would anyone need an alibi?" "No, it was most definitely not a suicide," I said. "What was it?" "That's a very interesting question," I said. "Maybe you should talk to the police about it." I was under the impression that the police had informed the family that Alex's death was a suicide. She began to spin her ring again. "Yes, they did, but there's more to it than that." "And you would know? Are you a police officer?" No, I'm just a disinterested third party." A disinterested third party who seems to be going out of his way to stir things up, I thought. "Hardly disinterested, it would seem, if you're bothering to be here and bothering to make frivolous allegations." There was that word again, frivolous. I decided while I was making trouble, I might as well follow my own advice and throw it all out there, see what stuck to the wall. I leaned in close. "The police are going with the official line that Alex killed himself, but it's a bunch of crap. I've seen the autopsy report, and I've talked to a few people. He was murdered, and for some reason the cops don't want to talk about it yet. I think it's because of something that Alex was involved in." I didn't get any further because her face got all pinched. She stood quickly and swayed as if she was going to be sick, then grabbed her coat and bag and almost ran for the door. I followed as she stumbled into one of the folding chairs, knocking the row out of kilter. She dropped her handbag, spilling its contents onto the floor. She scrambled to pick up a hairbrush and a book. I stooped to pick up a stack of brochures that had fallen out and scattered over the floor when she darted again for the door. I followed her across the lobby and down the stairs. "Miss," I called out as I came through the door at the bottom of the stairs. It had stopped raining, and the clack of her heels on the wet concrete was sharp in the ozone of the crisp after-storm air. She walked in the precise way of someone moving quickly on slick pavement in stiff, leather-soled shoes. I reached out and caught her elbow. She froze. "Miss," I said again, "please wait." I kept a gentle grip on her elbow and moved slowly around in front of her. "Are you all right?" She ducked her head down so I couldn't see her eyes as she dug in her bag and came back out with her headscarf. She shook my hand off and turned away from me as she put it on. It was an old-fashioned thing to do, a relic of a bygone era, a June Cleaver femininity. But it seemed to calm her, and she regained some of her earlier poise. She faced me, erect, arms crossed, the straps of her bag hanging from her left elbow. Yet underneath the crisp exterior, I saw confusion and fear. "Are you all right?" I asked again. "I'm fine," she said. "I shouldn't have come." "I think it's good that you did. I think it would have meant a lot to Alex." "Why do you say that? How could you know that? You told me you didn't know him. You don't know anything about him." "Neither did anyone in that room. That much was clear, but you obviously did. You have a connection with him or you wouldn't be here." Her face began to get pinched again, and she looked away. "You knew him from before. You knew him and you cared about him, and so you came tonight to honor that connection. That's important. I think it would have been important to him." She began to shake her head from side to side quickly. I heard a sharp intake of breath and then a sob. She brought a fist up to her mouth again. We were standing in front of a coffee shop, not a Starbucks, but a hip, downtown-style alternative. Under the awning was a dry bench. I steered her to it. Here, sit for a minute. She shook her head. Sit, I said. It's okay. She hesitated, looking at the bench, and then she sat. She took her handkerchief out of her bag and dabbed at her eyes. As I sat next to her, she returned the handkerchief to her bag and sat, back straight, knees together, looking directly ahead. I sat turned towards her. I waited. I shouldn't have come, she said again. Why not? I asked. She didn't respond. You knew Alex from before, I said. She nodded. You're a friend of his family, a friend of Simon. A friend, she said, her voice neutral. I don't know what else to call it. I know that you people have a certain kind of life. I don't profess to know anything about it. I know that Alex didn't want to be a part of it anymore. I know that caused a rift. I'm not unfamiliar with that kind of thing. You're not? No, I'm not. I know that the distances between people can appear to be unbridgeable, that people do things all the time that they think are unforgivable, and I know about regret. But I also know this. Alex was onto something before he died. I think it led to his death, and I also think whatever it was is left unfinished. Tell his parents that it won't stay unfinished. Tell them that someone is going to speak for Alex, even if they won't. Someone is going to speak for Alex now that he can't speak for himself. Will you do that? As I spoke, something shifted and settled inside me. You mean that, don't you? She asked. Yes, I do, I said. She turned her gaze forward. A minute passed, and then two. It began to rain again in earnest. I sat with her and listened to the rain. The wind picked up and blew a fine mist onto us as we sat under the awning. She turned her face to it, and the moisture started to build and bead on her brow, her cheeks. Then, without a word, she stood and walked away. Tell them, I called out to her again just before she turned to the corner. Maybe it will give them some comfort, I said to myself after she was gone. That's the end of chapter 18. So if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and click the bell when you do so that you get notifications of upcoming live stream readings. And head over to my website, MatthewArkin.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll be on my mailing list, and you'll get articles that I write on the craft of acting and writing.